I'm James DeBacco.
I'm Martin Leva.
And I'm Susie Hess. Our Stories Matter podcast was born out of a need for a brave space for people who experience the criminal punishment system to share their truths. This is Our Stories Matter, brought to you by Trauma Informed LA. Our Stories Matter celebrates the complex lived experiences of activists and healers by sharing their inspiring stories. In Season 4 of Our Stories Matter, we will focus on two organizations that are dismantling the 46,000 collateral consequences, Homeboy Industries and Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program. So today we welcome Father Gregory Boyle, founder of Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles, the world's largest gang rehabilitation and reentry program that serves more than 9,000 community members annually. I always say that if love is the answer, community is the context, and tenderness is the methodology. Context is everything. Everybody embraces content at the expense of context. You can deliver therapy, but it's the context that matters. We live in a society that's all about content. If only we knew more, but it's the context. Here's the place that will receive you. We won't try to reach you. We will try to be reached by you. Suddenly, you've changed the whole tenor of the place. So welcome, Father G. Beautiful words, as always.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
So we have interviewed Fabian, Ivy, Manuel, Gonzalo, and Stephanie, and they all talked about your heartbeat, every single one. So I'm wondering if we can start off and just talk about why does compassion matter?
Well, compassion is really about connective tissue. You know, what is it that, allows us to be empathic and to connect to people and to receive people. And as you said in that introduction about being reached by people. So it's a way of knowing and acknowledging that everybody is unshakably good and we belong to each other. So, we want to somehow never lose sight of that. It's the thing that keeps us compassionate and attentive and loving. It's in the end, it's about that.
Can I jump in with the question?
Yeah, get in there.
So I think when you share about compassion and you say we belong to each other, I've always had I always admired your work, as I said earlier, but I think as a former gang member, as somebody who's been to prison, somebody who's been involved, and now on the other side of helping people come to college, get educated, your work is so important to me. And I once heard you say, and I use this all the time, I once heard you say that you don't work with gangs, but rather you work with gang members. And this is kind of a two-part question because I want to know, what's one of the biggest lessons gang members have taught you? And why us? You know what I mean? As a former gang member, somebody who was a travieso when they're going through it, people who just never give up on us, I always wonder why. You know what I mean? So what's the biggest lessons gang members have taught you? And also, why us, Father G?
Well, I never set out to do anything, but I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city, and we had 8 gangs at war with each other. So I didn't set out to, I feel called to work with gang members. That wasn't even on my radar. But then, I was in a position where I, had to, these were my parishioners and I was burying kids. So then I just so you evolve, you back your way into things, So I knew everybody and I knew in those days, gangs were more kind of indigenous, their barrio was where they actually lived. Now there's a sort of a commuter reality. I live in Montebello, but my barrio is in, Pico Gardens or something like that. And you go, wow, that doesn't make any sense. But in the early days, that's why I said they were my parishioners, because they lived in their neighborhoods, and their neighborhoods, their barrios were in, my parish geography. Mm-hmm. So I never intended to do this, but once you do it, you kind of do recognize that the gang member is, in those days, in the beginning days, the most demonized, subgrouping of the poor. So they were demonized. They were easily despised. They were readily left out. They were the disposable. And so, they were my parishioners, but because I knew them and they were eternally interesting and funny and loving and so cariñoso, and I thought, wow, why are these folks demonized? It doesn't make any sense. And it's like, and of course, law enforcement would say, if only Father Boyle knew the gang members like we do. And I go, well, obviously that's nonsense, because, I knew them. Of course I knew them better than law enforcement. So anyway, it was a thing that kind of, then you're responding, well, what if people wanted to have their tattoos removed? Okay, let's get a machine, and let's have a clinic, and let's have 45 volunteer doctors do it, that kind of thing. So all those things were, we originally started out, school was the first thing we did. And then they kept saying, if only we had jobs. And then we tried to get, try to find employers, felony-friendly employers. And we couldn't find enough. So that's when we started, a maintenance crew, a landscaping crew. So we did all those things really as a response, just trying to make our way. And so nobody intends to start, the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program on the planet, but you back your way into it. And that's kind of what we did.
It's beautiful. Well, I appreciate your work.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Father G, one of the things that really stands out to me is when I was locked up and I was in the security housing unit at Tehachapi, I had an opportunity to read your book, Tattoos on the Heart. And I was just mesmerized, and I was floored by the way that you were able to just move around, vicariously through Boyle Heights at will, and without, having any fear or any peril, to your life, because you were so involved with the compassion and empathy of others. So, the tattoos on the heart, it reminds us that no life is less valuable than another, is what you said. So as an advocate for radical kinship, how do you believe that trauma-informed approaches can contribute to building stronger communities and reducing violence?
Well, it's interesting because recently, they were in LA, they said that homicides are down 12%. And so again, we all know that when stuff like that happens, law enforcement, takes credit for the fact that happened. But, they have a notion, which is, who causes crime or what causes crime? And they would say criminals. And we would say, well, no, actually, a lethal absence of hope, traumatized, as you say, the damaged, the wounded, the broken, those who are suffering mental anguish, that's the cause of crime. So if we knew that to be true, as all of us know that to be true, then what would you do? Well, you would infuse hope to folks for whom hope is foreign, and you'd help heal what is broken and wounded and damaged, and you'd deliver mental health services in a timely way. And now, would that stop crime? Of course it would, because criminals don't cause crime. People who are in pain cause crime. So alleviate the suffering, alleviate the pain, and watch what happens to the statistics. But again, if you think bad guys doing bad things is what crime is about, then I don't know, then you hire 1,000 more police. But if you want to get underneath this, or the homies always say, find the thorn underneath, that's what you want. You want to find the thorn underneath. And so being trauma informed is being aware that behavior is a language. And if people color outside the lines, they're speaking a language to you. and it's a language of despair and wound and trauma and mental anguish. So let's roll up our sleeves and walk each other home to health and wholeness.
You know, that I love that. That is so authentic that you said that. I've never actually heard, you know, compassion expressed in that manner. And I just that's beautiful right there. And I really appreciate your response.
Well, part of the issue is that, you know, we have these notions that we keep co-signing on, you know, like I spoke recently at a New York, LA Times book festival thing, and I was on a panel with a rabbi and Steve Lopez, who's a columnist for the LA Times. And at one point I said, I was talking about everybody's unshakably good, no exceptions. We belong to each other, no exceptions. And I said, do I think that if we embrace those two notions, it would in fact address all the vexing, complex social dilemma that face us? Do I think that would happen? And I paused for a second. I said, yes, I do. And the whole audience, a big packed room, roared with laughter. And when the laughter subsided, I looked at them and I said, yes, I do. Actually, I do. I think if we embrace those two notions, so suddenly somebody who has a gun and is shooting up somewhere, if you know that that person is unshakably good and belongs to us, well, then you're going to roll up your sleeves and you're going to try to recognize when the person's in distress, and you're going to try to deliver alivio, you know, you're going to try to help this person.
Right.
So that they suddenly don't shoot up, you know, a synagogue in Pittsburgh.
Right.
Or a school in Uvalde.
Right.
Or be a homie who goes on a mission into an enemy's neighborhood. So, but if you think that there are bad guys out there, then all bets are off. You know, brace yourself. It's not going to look good, because you can draw a straight line from every excessive use of force by police and the notion that there are bad people out there. But we all believe it. We've all been raised on it, and we need to unlearn it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love all of your words.
That.
Oh my God. I love that too. And, you know, you had a t-shirt that said, nothing stops a bullet like a job. So when we talk about sort of the underlying thorns of poverty and employment and education that leads to behaviors of survival, do you feel that things have changed in terms of what has been created at Homeboys with employment and training and education?
Yeah, you know, because in the early days, it was job, job, job. And the truth is, you know, not all employed gang members, you know, will stay out of prison, and not all educated ones will. But then about 15 years in, we said a healed gang member will not reoffend, period. So we kind of retired our t-shirts. Maybe they still have them somewhere.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because it was more than a job. In the early years, I mean, part of the thing was because we had a school, and gang members would say, if only we had jobs. So I learned many years later that if you listen to gang members, they may say, if only I had a job. But if you know gang members, then you'll know it's about healing. So we shifted probably in midpoint. We still locate jobs. We still have a huge employment services department. You know, we have our 18-month training program. And then after they're done here, we try to make the transition seamless to go to another job. So we still believe in jobs, but healing is kind of the essential thing. And that's why the 18 months is an essential foundational time of healing. It's, you know, 18 months is how long it takes for an infant to attach to the caregiver. So we kind of use that parallel universe, that it's about attachment repair. And so how do you get people connected, to each other and excavate their wounds and do the work so that they can leave us after 18 months and the world will throw at them what it will, but this time they're not going to be toppled by it because they're sturdy, they're resilient. And that's born in a community of cherished belonging. So, that's what you want to cultivate here. But, Homeboy is the front porch of the house everybody wants to live in. So you're also pointing to the world and you're saying, enemies work side by side here. They stand next to each other making croissants. They used to shoot at each other. Now they're making bread. So you want to announce that message, that what if we had this as a goal, a community of kinship and cherished belonging? And if that was our goal, I think we would no longer be promoting justice. We would be celebrating it.
If I can ask, because I love that, I truly do believe that somebody who's formerly incarcerated, I think James could contest to this too, like the healing, the inner child in me was the most important thing. The love that I didn't get, I had to not only receive it, but actually start to love myself. Like healing has been the number one way I've been able to stay out of prison 16 years and stay proactive in my life, give to others. But in like the 18-month program, working with the beautiful people you do, what does healing look like for them? And is there a resistance to it? Because trauma, sometimes the only thing we know, it's the only thing we go back to. So healing, actually, we've got to face that trauma face on and not go around it, not go over it, not go under it, but go through it. What does that healing look like for some of the folks around your space?
That's an excellent question, because it's like, our graduates from our Jesuit high schools, they always have that question, what does the graduate look like at graduation? So there's an idea to, they get very noisy. So every once in a while I have to signal that they calm down. And so I think part of the thing is people leave all the time here. They'll disappear. They'll stop coming. They'll relapse. They'll get popped and go back to jail. In our early years, we were always fretting. We got, oh God, I wonder if they'll come back. But now nobody says that. We all say, oh, he'll be back. She'll be back. Because once you get a dose of people cherishing you, it's so compelling. But coupled with that is exactly what you were saying, that sometimes you have to kind of face, what was done to you. And even the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, what kids are exposed to, as you were talking about inner child, that you have to, do the work. And there are a lot of ways to do it. It's not just talk therapy. Sometimes it's in group. We have an equine therapy program where they go out and work with horses. I mean, it's incredible. Wow. Once a week. And a whole group goes, and it's very therapeutic, totally therapeutic. So, but I think, I was thinking this, my latest theory is about home. And I remember a homie said to me, you know what the best part of Homeboy Industries is? I said, what? He said, the home part. And this is more home than home. But I was reading a Tibetan saying the other day, and it says, wherever you have received the most love, that is home. And we get that. We get that. And I've received more love here in this community. But I thought, is that really what home is? Because the problem is people leave here and they have to go, they get another job in that warehouse and they go, oh God, it's not the same. I don't like it here. So then I think that the caveat is that I would say loving is your home, the act of loving. So that if you believe that, it's never about receiving love, which is gravy and icing on the cake. It's fine to receive love. But the goal is to be loving. And if loving is your home, you'll never be homesick. And so I was thinking that's the measure of health. Healing ends in the graveyard for all of us. But if after 18 months they can leave here sturdy, resilient, and if they can know that loving is their home, then they can leave here. Yeah. And again, the world will throw at them what it will, and they won't be toppled, because it's not about receiving love, it's about being loving. Then they let love live through them. Then they find their true self in loving. And it's a beautiful thing.
You know, in that awareness, when you talk about the love, you know, and we're working with men and women who are formerly incarcerated and, you know, former gang members, or even still on the fence of being a gang member. What, in your opinion, what are some effective strategies for engaging and supporting those individuals who may be resistant to seeking help or breaking away from gang involvement due to the traumas that they've experienced?
Yeah, so earlier you mentioned that we don't work with gangs, we work with gang members. And I learned that kind of the hard way. I mean, I don't regret any of the work I did in the early years, because I worked with gangs in the early years. I mean, peace treaties, truces, ceasefires, shuttle diplomacy. I did all that stuff, and I don't regret it, but I'd never do it again, because it served the cohesion of the gang. It kept the gang together, and it gave it oxygen. So I would never do that again. So I always say, our program is not for those who need help, it's only for those who want it. So you do have to walk through the door.
Right.
But that's the same thing like a drug rehab. You know, it kind of doesn't work unless you want it to work. And at the end of every 12-step program, they say, keep coming back. It works if you work it.
Right.
And that's the same thing here. So we don't recruit, and we don't cajole, and we don't try to convince people to walk through our doors. You know, when we had 3 juvenile halls and 25 detention probation camps, and I would say mass at them, I would hand out my card endlessly. And I can remember a guy came in here, and this has happened many times, and he's all covered in tattoos on his face. And he says, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Help me out, I don't." He said, "Well, you baptized me at Central Juvenile Hall." I said, "Wow." And then he reaches into his wallet and he pulls out this old crinkly card that I gave him, 20 years ago. And, it's an old card. So it has several addresses ago. This is our 4th headquarters. And I'm looking at it and say, whoa, we haven't been in that office for a long time. So I go to hand it back to him. And this has happened many times. And there are big tears in this guy's eyes. And he looks at me and he says, "I should have called you." And it's heartbreaking because, yeah, he should have. But no amount of me wanting him to have a life is the same as him wanting to have one. So, but it's heartbreaking. And to this day, after 35 years of this organization, if I could accelerate that process, I'd do it. But I don't know how to, because like all recovery, it takes what it takes. In gang recovery, it's, I don't know, the birth of a son, the death of a friend, a long stretch in prison, and it takes what it takes. But none of us on this screen can manufacture that, and except for the fact that we're always here, 120,000 gang members in LA County, every single one knows who we are and what we do, and we wait.
Yeah. I think about how I know James, by the way, is
I'm an advisor to students at USC who are formerly incarcerated, and James is the president, and they call themselves the Unchained Scholars. And they created themselves. You know, it wasn't anything to do with like USC or anyone else. They rose up. They wanted the support. So when I hear you talking about like, you know, coming forward and sort of wanting that, you know, I see that for sure, you know, in James and all the Unchained Scholars. But my question for you is, you know, people always throw out the word resilience. And I'm wondering how you would talk about resilience. What does that look like? And what can people do to sort of develop or help to support resilience?
Well, you know, I use the word sturdy, which means you're not going to get knocked over by anything. And it's the same thing, resilience. But if it's true, as I think we'd all agree, that a traumatized person may be likely to cause trauma, you know how they say hurt people hurt people. If that's true, it has to be true that a cherished person is going to be able to find their way to the joy there is in cherishing themselves and others. It has to be true. So that's the dose that people receive. It's a dosage, you know, but everybody does it. It's not like they're lined up to come to my office and I cherish them. I do. But so do the homies who are security guards here. They do it too. And so to everybody, you know, everybody does it. And so it's a kind of, everybody participates in that. So we always think that, and it's like building character, you know, like, here, hand me a hammer, I need to build character. You know, I don't think you don't build character. You love people. And they're going to find some core. Healthy people have character. Not, you know, it's not bad people don't have it. It's healthy people have character, integrity, you know, a moral compass. But you don't teach that. You love people into embracing it. And that's different. And that's why it's, you know, so systems change when people change, and people change when they're cherished. I don't know any other way. So like the county jail sometimes will have, you know, what do you call it? Behavior modification. And and they love that. They love, yeah, we have a behavior modification program. I can't remember what they call it, but it's like, who does that serve? Well, it serves society who would feel better if you behave differently. But Homeboy is the opposite of that. No, we want you to experience real life healing, which gives birth to resilience and sturdiness. Oh, and by the way, the byproduct of that is behavior changes. But we approach it at a different way. We don't say cut that shit out. We say we love people. We cherish them. We know their name. We know what they're carrying. We stand in awe at what they have to carry rather than in judgment at how they carry it. And so that will lead to character, and that will lead to integrity and authenticity, and that will lead to behavior changes. But I think that's a more organic way to approach it rather than wagging the finger and say, don't do this, do that.
That's, you know, shit, G. I love listening to you talk because one thing I've learned in myself the last 16 years of being home from prison and doing work and being around so many just wonderful people and in talking about behavior change. I mean, to me, you're an amazing role model. Right? It's the way you eloquently talk about feelings and emotions and all this stuff. And I've always believed that to not even assist, but just to help other people change, you got to role model what you want them to do. You know, I believe that we got to serve as role models, and if they see somebody doing something different, that gives them permission to do it too. And I just love listening to you talk because it just helps me. I'm taking notes here because I'm like, this is the work. This is how the work happens. You learn from others and you give it away. But I have a question for you. around trauma. And I hope that you have a group of people who ask you this on a very regular basis, but I'm going to ask you because Susie and James and I and others, we work around trauma. We see trauma, right? And I know that you have been around trauma since, I'm assuming, I'm just making something. You've been around it. You've seen it since the day you started. You know it. You see it. You said it here. You've buried plenty of individuals. And I think that role modeling self-care is so important. But everything you do, everything you see, even the stories that you hear, interactions you have, you make an assumption there's a lot of trauma. I honestly want to know, how is it that you take care of yourself? Because we have to take care of ourselves to be in the mix of being able to help others. I've always wanted to ask you this question. So how is it that you take care of yourself? What is it that you do?
Well, I think obviously I don't take care of myself. I'm just overweight and aged and tired. And A. And B, I kind of have a different take on self-care, you know. So like, I don't believe in burnout. So sometimes staff here, because I learned this 10 years in, and then I've never been close to burnout since. But by year 10, you know, I realized that I was burning out. And I'll tell this story briefly, but I took a homie to rehab who was in the projects and a gang member, and he was selling crack, and then he became his own best customer. And so I drove him to a rehab. 30 days later, I had to call him to tell him that his younger brother put a gun to his head and killed himself. He was also a gang member. Gang members don't do this, as you know, and it was quite a rare thing. And so I told this guy, Lulu, I said, I'm going to pick you up, bring you to the funeral, but I'm going to drive you right back. And he says, please do. I want you to. I love how rehab feels. So I went to pick him up. He gave me a big abrazo. He gets in the car and he says, I had a dream last night and you were in it. And so in the dream, he says, we're in a, you know, kind of room, like a ballroom size, small ballroom or conference room or something. And there are no windows, no lights, no illuminated exit signs, no light creeping under the door, black. And he says that I'm silent and we're not talking to each other, but he knows I'm in the room, even though it's pitch black. And in the darkness, suddenly I pull out of my pocket a flashlight and I aim it steadily on the light switch. And he knows that he's the only one who can turn the light switch on. And he's very grateful that I have a flashlight. So he follows the beam of light until he gets to the light switch. And with great trepidation, he flips the light on. And now he's sobbing as he's telling me this dream. And he says, the light is better than the darkness. Like he didn't know that to be the case. But I've never had an experience like this in my 69 years of living, but just like that, like a light switch, it just changed everything. I knew exactly what it meant, that the source of my burnout was I was trying to turn the light switch on for gang members. You can't do it. You have to be content with the fact that you own a flashlight and you know where to aim it. And so when staff members come to me and they say, oh, I just think I'm just too compassionate and I need 3 months off or something, I go, with all due respect and great love, the reason you're burning out is because you've allowed this to become about you, and it's not about you. If you go to the margins to rescue, save, fix, then it's about you. It can't be. But if you go to the margins to be reached by people, if you go to the margins to receive them, if you go to the margins to have your heart altered by them, then it's exquisitely mutual. You know, you're all inhabiting your mutual dignity and nobility. Then you're never depleted because it's not about you. You know, if you don't go to the margins to make a difference. You go to the margins so the folks at the margins make you different, and then it's about us instead of about just me. So I can't think of any other thing in my life where I saw something and I never could unsee it again. I've never gone back. I've never been close to burnout in 15 years, I guess, or more. 25 years. Yeah, in 25 years, I've never been close. You get tired, you get exhausted. You need to do your own practice, like prayer, praying. I sit in the morning. I do my 50-minute walk in the morning. I get up at 2:45. I'm kind of a monk that way. But
wow.
So you do all those things, and that's your practice. And practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent.
Mm-hmm.
But the insight that it can't be about me, then every day you're delighting in people. Every day it's eternally replenishing, as opposed to depleting. And it used to be depleting in my early years because I was on my bike in the middle of the night and put that Uzi down. Are you sure you want to shoot that guy? And that was my life for 10 years. And was I burning out? Yes. Not because the work was hard, but because it was about me. And I was trying to fix people. And I was trying to turn the light switch on for people. So every one of us possesses a flashlight, and every one of us knows where to aim it. And that has to be enough.
Wow, that is so empowering. Go ahead, Martin.
I was just gonna say I love that story, and thank you for your response there. I just wrote down it's just take the self out of self-care, and it's really about care all the way around. So I think that's beautiful. Thank you.
Well, but also earlier the thing about loving, why are people sad? Because they're self-absorbed. I can't think of any other reason. And how do people pull themselves out of sadness? Well, when they are other-centered. I just had a homie in here right now who's in recovery, and he was talking to a younger guy. He had told me this. And the younger guy said, I feel so sad. I feel kind of depressed. And so the older homie said, get on the phone right now with somebody who's in recovery and check in with them. Not a sponsor, but somebody that who is in recovery, and just ask how they're doing. How's their recovery? Kind of what are they going through? The guy came back 15 minutes later. He was literally transformed because he had done that. But if you dissect it, it's because, he found out that loving is his home, and he's not going to feel homesick. And so he goes, and sure, it begins in service, and maybe it begins as being other-centered, but it ends up being loving-centered. And none of us know anybody who's loving-centered who is sad. You just don't.
Wow.
And it's really about the source of that is self-absorption. So you just want to, and that's our practice, is to keep us letting love live through us and anchored in the other.
Wow. That is so
great wisdom. Great wisdom.
Amazing wisdom. And, and I think about, we're wired to be in connection. We're wired to be in relationships. And, self-care, I've never liked the word self and self-care. I believe in it, but I believe in community care, or we care, that we're part of a community together. And that one homie telling the other homie to call, a peer, a friend who's in it. I mean, to me, that's community care. That's beautiful.
Absolutely. I was embarrassed. I had somebody who I don't know asked me to put a blurb on her book, and the book was about self-care. and I kind of don't believe in it. So, but I did it anyway. This is a very helpful book. But I mean, it's like I felt badly because I don't think it gets at what we want to how can you stay flourishing? How does that happen? And it happens by moving outside of ourselves.
It's fascinating that you have these wisdoms, and it's like I'm thinking right now, I'm like, oh my God, he's just rewritten the whole social work instructional manual, just basically by saying that you don't believe in self-care in that way. And I find that fascinating because in the work that I do, I work with Center for Counsel. I'm actually a program manager for Center for Counsel, and with Jared Side, who you probably know. And we come into Homeboy, and we actually we provide our counsel circles for the women's empowerment group, and then also for the men's and the common stories that Gonzalo runs. So the cool thing about listening to you and hearing you speak, it's allowing me to basically shift my mindset and my pattern of thought on how I go in and how I see myself, not as a practitioner of compassion, but as somebody that's going in to just be available for somebody else for their compassion. And I just find that so fascinating and so heartwarming. And it just brings me, to this. My next question is, what advice or insights would you offer to other organizations or other individuals looking to implement like trauma-informed practices in their own communities or work environments?
Well, I always use this example of a homie I met in Houston who was a hardcore gang intervention worker. So he'd been to prison, tattooed, gang member, and he was, working with gang members in the streets of Houston. And he pleaded with me after my talk. He said, how do you reach them? And I found myself saying, well, for starters, stop trying to reach them. Can you be reached by them? So I think it's a stance. How do you stand at the margins? If you're going to the margins to reach people, then it's you'll burn out in all the things that I mentioned before. But because it feels passive to just receive people or to, I don't know, to be reached by them. And yet it isn't passive, because what happens is you're inhabiting the same shared space, and everybody's, the Buddhists always talk about, oh, nobly born, remember who you really are. Well, everybody's holding up the mirror and reminding each other, you're exactly what God had in mind when God made you. And then everybody's becoming that truth. Everybody's inhabiting that truth. And then that's resilience, because then no bullet can pierce that. Death can't touch it. 4 prison walls can't keep that out. That's, once you know that, that's the pearl of great price. But you're doing this with each other. And that's really important. Otherwise, like maybe comparable programs, want to deliver services. And I'm always careful about that, because we deliver services, but it's secondary to the cherishing that happens here. Otherwise, you become the DMV. Somebody comes in and they say, I need anger management. Well, you need window number 45. Yeah, you don't want to do that. You want to just say, it's a little bit like, when people like volunteer. Before the pandemic, we had like 300 volunteers here who did a variety of things. Doctors who removed tattoos, tutors, psychologists, counselors. And they'd always say the same when they came, especially the non-doctor group. They'd say, what are we going to do here? I want to volunteer. What am I going to do? And I'd always say, no, what's going to happen to you? that's a better question. But if it's about what you do, then it's kind of it's a different thing, and so, every one of us has heard somebody say, oh, I went to the soup kitchen, and I'm telling you right now, I got more out of it than I gave. It's a little bit like that, but it's way beyond that, because it's not about giving, it's about receiving, oddly, and it's about holding people. So I'm a Jesuit, and St. Ignatius of Loyola had this word he used called acatamiento. And it comes from an archaic word, acatar, which means to look at something with attention. And it gets translated, acatamiento, as affectionate awe. And that's the stance. You stand at the margins with acatamiento, with affectionate awe. You're receiving people. You're allowing them to reach you. Yes, I'm letting my heart be altered by you. And I'm standing here with affectionate awe. I'm not standing here with, get your act together. Can't you behave better? I'm standing here with awe at what you have to carry every day. And it's affectionate. It's cariñoso. And so I think that's what you want,
Father G, it's just been an absolute privilege and honor to be able to have this time and experience with you. And, you are the example of listening from the heart and speaking from the heart. And, I'm just so moved, and I'm so touched, and I'm so honored. And I just want to know, what was it like for you to share and tell your story today?
Well, I feel like you guys are kindred spirits. So, you understand the shorthand, and that's nice, because now we're all part of the same, you three have been doing this for a long time. So we're all part of the same effort, which is to imagine something different. It's healthy, it's good, it's right and true to imagine a world where policing is obsolete and prisons are empty. It's okay to imagine that, because once you imagine it, then you can kind of set about to, make it a reality. So, and it's like we're all doing, our own small thing. And thank you for saying those nice things. Although I feel like I don't do it very, I feel like that's the practice. So homies here will say, who are in recovery, one day at a time, like everybody would say. And I would say, no, one breath at a time. Because
Nice.
It's really about the inhale and the exhale. With every breath, you cherish with every breath. And that's your intentionality. And cherishing people is not hard. Remembering to cherish, now that's difficult. So we have to remind each other to remember. And it's really it's not a daily thing. You don't get, you're not like one of those electric cars where you plug yourself in the morning and you're good to go. I wish. And I wish all the insights that the four of us share in common, there's nothing once and for all about them. You really do have to connect to it every breath you take. I will cherish this person. I will delight in the person who's about to come into my office, even though I know them to be, a pain in the ass. So, but, so I've had about 93 of those today alone. Mm-hmm. But you have to kind of return to, behaviors of language. They're coming at me sideways. That's okay. Just love them. And I don't know. That's what I think.
Oh my God. Father G, that you have given me so much and more. And I can't wait to go back and listen all over again. I so appreciate your heartbeat. And yeah, Manuel and Gonzalo and Stephanie and Fabian. I mean, everyone I agree with.
They loved being with you. And so in fact, I didn't quite get what was going on. And they kept, Puka is Stephanie, we call her Puka. And she kept coming in, you got to do this. And then somebody else was telling me, you got to do this. And I go, okay, I'll do it. I didn't quite know exactly what was happening because I basically don't ever know what's happening. So people point me in the right direction and I go. But it's been a joy to be with you guys.
It's been such an honor. Thank you. Thank you. Sure. Such an honor.
Yeah, to be continued because this conversation has to continue.
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Father G.
Our Stories Matter is brought to you by Trauma Informed Los Angeles. We want to thank Homeboy Industries and the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program for sharing their experiences and opening their doors and hearts to us. Thank you also to Fabian Deborah for allowing us to record at Homeboy's Art Academy. Thank you also to the University of Southern California Good Neighbors. And thank you to Yehuda Price for composing our original music while incarcerated. Thank you, Ivan Reyes, our amazing editor. Please consider giving us a review with a 5-star shout out. Subscribe to Our Stories Matter wherever you get your podcasts. Join our trauma-informed Los Angeles community at traumainformedla.org. Please go to our website to read the full bios and credits. And stay tuned for more Our Stories Matter.
We would like to take a moment to acknowledge the original stewards of the land where our event takes place today. Trauma Informed Los Angeles acknowledges the Gabrielino Tongva people as the traditional land caretakers of the Tavangar, which today is the Los Angeles Basin and Channel Islands. We are committed to uplifting the names and community members of these lands and across the nation who reside alongside us. We also want to acknowledge the suffering and forced unpaid labor of enslaved Africans and African Americans, which enabled the start of this country.